Saguenay native plant community, and I'm here today with Kathy.
Hi, everyone.
We're excited to bring you a second video in our Grow Your Own Native Plants at Home series. And in tonight's presentation, we're going to be talking about native plants that need a longer period of cold stratification. So we're calling it Cool for 60. If you're familiar with germination codes, it means that these are plants that need to be in cold stratification for 60 days. And you can do this with either winter sowing or indoor growing. And if you missed our first video, check out our video about starting native plants from seed indoors. And we're going to also have one coming up about winter sowing. So let's get started.
Before I advance the slide, though, everybody needs to look at how cute that bumblebee is.
And
Oh.
this one's definitely a bumblebee, not a carpenter bee. All right, so why do some seeds need longer cold stratification than others? Here we have a beautiful swallowtail butterfly on a cardinal flower, lobelia cardinalis. And this is one of the plants we're going to be looking at tonight that does need this longer stratification period. So it means that these seeds need to be exposed to a moist, wet, cold period for at least 60 days. And the length of this cold stratification required by these seeds depends on their specific adaptations to their native environments and ecological strategies. So seeds have built-in dormancy mechanisms, and they can be pretty complex, especially these ones that need this cold stratification or other things to break their dormancy. And there are a couple things that we can look at. So seeds with deeper dormancy levels require longer cold periods to break this dormancy. It could be a physical dormancy. Some seeds have tough outer shells that soften over a prolonged moist cold period. So if we think about something like blue wild indigo, that's got a tough outer shell that needs to break down a little bit to start the germination process. It could also be something physiological where the cold actually triggers the hormonal changes that signal the seed to germinate. So especially with this longer cold period, we think about a cold winter, it's many months long, and all of a sudden the seed knows that it's time to break the dormancy, it's germination time once the spring hits, and that's going to make it more successful in its germination rate. So this dormancy period helps the seed and helps the plant to propagate. And something very interesting about some of these plants that we're going to be looking at tonight. So Jacob's ladder, wild geranium, Virginia bluebells, and wild strawberry seeds all have this natural coating that becomes gelatinous when exposed to moisture during stratification. And this gelatinous coating helps the seed retain water and aids in germination. And this is something that you wouldn't see if you just planted your seeds in a milk jug and did winter sowing. But when you do the cold stratification with the fridge method, where you're actually keeping the seeds wet in the fridge for 60 days in paper towel, once you open that paper towel up, you'll see that these seeds have this coating on them. And when I first saw this, I thought, wow, there's something happening with these seeds. They actually look like chia seeds with this coating on the seeds. So it's kind of fascinating when you do it, either method, you're going to learn something new. But this was a real learning aha moment for me. So in natural conditions, this gelatinous or mucilage layer helps the seed adhere to the soil and improves seed to soil contact for germination. So that's one of the other aspects that helps the seed know that it's time to get growing is when it actually touches the soil. So the two are mutually beneficial and that seed to soil contact is absolutely essential. This sticky coating may also deter some seed predators and help the seed survive challenging conditions with that extra built-in moisture. So it's just kind of fascinating how the little things of the world work and how all these mechanisms are built in to help that plant survive and help it grow in the wild. And here we have beautiful prairie smoke, which is a plant we're going to be looking at tonight. Um, just gorgeous, absolutely a beautiful spring stunner. And the duration of this cold stratification is tailored to a seed's ecological niche and ensures its survival and reproduction in the wild. And mimicking these natural cycles during seed starting indoors or winter sowing outdoors is crucial for successful germination. So these are seeds that we can't just really plant in the spring. We need to make sure that we're prepping them with this cold, moist stratification in order to ensure a successful germination rate. And these plants that we're looking at tonight are pretty fascinating because they run the gamut of being native in many areas of our country. One of them, wild strawberry, is native across the entire country. So all the way from the tip of Minnesota down to Florida. And if you can think about all of those different ecological conditions, it still is a cold stratification for 60 days seed. So something in its, ecological makeup has set it to have this long dormancy period to ensure successful germination across this range of ecosystems. So for cold stratification required seeds, you can use two different methods. You can do winter sowing, where you would start in a milk jug. They have to be a clear milk jug, and you make these kind of mini greenhouses, and we're going to be doing a little video on this too. So you can start your seeds in these containers outside midwinter, January, February. So now is the perfect time to get going with your winter sowing and get these jugs outside. You want to leave the tops open to allow the precipitation to get into the container. And just as the weather starts to warm up, make sure that they're not drying out. So this is one method where the seeds are being exposed to the cold, wet conditions just by being outside in soil medium inside the little jug and keeping them safe from any predators that might want to find them. But this is also the time if you want to try seed starting indoors. So you can do the cold stratification method, and we outlined this process in our last video about seed starting indoors. But basically what you do is you just kind of soak the seeds, get them wet, put them in a coffee filter and wrap that up in a paper towel, make sure it's pretty moist. You put them in a Ziploc bag, make sure you label it, and you stick it in your fridge for 60 days. So you want to do this process midwinter, January or February. So now's the time. Leave it in the fridge for 60 days, and then you're going to plant your little seeds inside mid-March. So you're going to get them growing in a seed starting medium under grow lights, and then you'll have some beautiful plants to start taking outside in the next 6 to 8 weeks after that. So end of April, early May, you'll start to have some fabulous looking plants if you're growing indoors. So two different things you can try, and also I would really suggest trying these seeds both ways because you might have better success with winter sowing versus seed starting indoors. And again, the germination, it's all up to nature and seeing how it goes. But we're giving them their best start by making sure that we're actually stratifying them, giving them those cold, moist conditions for 60 days, and then seeing which method works best for them. So either trying the winter sowing outside or seed starting indoors.
Now we're going to be going over some plants that need 60 days cold stratification to germinate. And not only is this going to bring attention to what plants, like if you're going to plan on starting some of these seeds, either, outdoor direct sowing or in your inside, you want to know what plants you need to do 60 days on. And this is just going to be some of them. There are many more that need 60-day stratification, but this is going to be some of them. And the other cool thing, we'll go through these, but it's also some of these 60-day stratification plants are some of the most beautiful and underutilized of our native plants. And that's why it's really going to be cool to go through some of these, because it's also going to help us, make our wish list for this spring. So even if you're not going to start them from seed, you might look at one of these and say, oh no, but I want to try to get one of those or get a few of those, because these are some awesome plants. And when I look at this one, Lexi, you talk about, like, the different reasons why it might take different types of plants or different seeds longer to germinate, and how we really don't know, fully what it is that sets a seed off. I mean, it's like most of the time it's pretty regular, but there are things that can come up and different things that can change. And there are actually some seeds that can lay dormant for years outside and just something happens and boom, all of a sudden the conditions are right. If it hasn't rotted or completely dried out, sometimes all of a sudden the conditions are right and it will germinate. And I was reading, something recently about this, and you had mentioned last week in the presentation that you did on starting seeds, about how some seeds actually need a period of cold and a period of hot, and the hot is very important to them too. And these articles that I was reading through were talking about um, seed germination, but it was more as it refers to the forest floor. In the Chicago area where we are, we have a lot of forest preserve area. And like most of the country, our natural places, unfortunately, tend to be overrun with invasive species. And our forest preserve districts around here are always doing burns and other forms of removal to try to get these invasive species out, to try to open up the forest floor for some of our native species that are supposed to be there, not the buckthorn or the autumn olive or the invasive honeysuckle. But I look at this page and some of these shade-loving ground covers, these small plants, these are the ones that are supposed to be there, along with our small sedges and spring ephemerals and so on. And so when I look at these and this these articles I read actually talked about how some plants, we do burns to try to get rid, keep the invasive species in check. But these articles had said that there are some species where the seeds actually germinate after a fire, that they need the fire to germinate. How weird is that? I mean, there's so much we don't know about seed germination, right?
It's so fascinating. And some need, multiple complex seasons of dormancy in order to germinate. So they might need a cold period, then a hot period, then another cold period, and then finally it's time to germinate. So again, it's just another fascinating aspect about how these plants have, survived, and now they're dependent on us to survive even further because we've got these invasive species problems. So
That are
whatever we
taking
can do.
over and sucking all the moisture out of the ground and not letting any sun go through and just kind of squelching out our native species. But those seeds are, in many instances, those are there. And when they get rid of those invasives, all of a sudden these start popping up. It's amazing. But anyway, so I digress there. Just had to bring that up. But these are a lot of our really underutilized, beautiful, smaller plants that you would find in the shade of the forest, and a lot of these are ones plus many more that need 60-day stratification. So some of these that we'll be talking about are our Virginia bluebells, wild columbine, wild geranium, Jacob's ladder, wild strawberry, and prairie smoke. And these are all spring bloomers when there's still some sun coming through the forest canopy. And then here we have some of our summer bloomers. And again, this is just some of them. It's not an exhausted list by any means of 60-day stratification plants, but we have button blazing star, but really all of our native liatris need 60 days for seed stratification. Great blue lobelia, cardinal flower, rattlesnake master, Mistflower, which is behind Lexi, and big-leafed aster. And actually, Lexi had said that most of our native asters require 60-day stratification.
So let's get into looking at these plants, and they are some beauties, especially Virginia bluebells. It's not spring without seeing Virginia
If you
bluebells.
don't have any of these, I don't care if you've never planted a native plant or if you have redone your whole landscape in native plants. Wherever you are on the spectrum, if you don't have any of these, you don't know what you're missing. To me, this is spring. These guys are
Absolutely.
spring.
And they turn two colors too. So they start out with
Mhm.
these little kind of pink buds. You can see them there. And then they turn into this gorgeous soft blue color.
And
And
they
so
glow. They literally glow, you
they're
know?
absolutely stunning and just such an elegant plant. And this is going to look great in any landscape. And the cool thing about this plant is that it is an ephemeral, true ephemeral, which means that it's going to go dormant by midsummer. So this plant kind of just like disappears and goes away. That's the ephemeral nature of it. And then if you plant other things right by it, those can kind of take in and fill in. So as you're planning your garden, thinking about what's blooming at what time, and especially giving some space for the ephemerals and then maybe something that's going to shoot up and, be a great complement to it later on after it's gone dormant. These are pollinated by bees, especially our female bumblebees. It's like this shape of this flower was made for bumblebees, and we just love bumblebees.
And
Uh,
I and
but
I want to say, it's a spring ephemeral, and we'll be doing a video in the future just on our native spring ephemerals, which basically there are native bulbs. They're not daffodils, they're not tulips, but we have our own native quote unquote bulbs, spring blooming. And when those queen bumblebees are breaking dormancy and they're coming out and they're starting their new nest and they're going to start, reproducing, this is one of the species that are critical for them early in the season.
Yeah, and they're just gorgeous. And also the butterflies and moths, some of those early season butterflies and moths too are also dependent on this plant. And they can reach into these flowers and get those nectar sources. So this one it really does like the shade, partial shade to full shade, and it likes moist, rich, well-drained soils. And this is definitely a woodland type of plant. It only gets 1 to 2 feet tall. And like Kathy was saying, if you see a field of or a whole swath of these as just a sight to behold, it does naturalize over time. So they will fill in and give you this beautiful carpet effect of these Virginia bluebells. They are moderately deer resistant too for anyone who has those kinds of issues. And they are native to Eastern North America and hardy in zones 3 to 8. So here you can see our native range, and again, native to the eastern US. And here you can see a beautiful eastern tiger swallowtail butterfly sticking its head in there, getting the nectar source. How cute is that?
It's amazing how long their proboscis is, right? They can get way up into those very elongated flowers.
Yeah, you can't even see its head.
He's in heaven over there.
Yeah.
Speaking of elongated flowers, let's talk about our wild columbine that needs 60 days germination, cold stratification. Aquilegia canadensis. These red and yellow tubular flowers, and you don't see many, we don't have a lot of red native plants, maybe in tropical regions, but most of our native plants, I mean, how many species are there that are red? One, two, three tops, so not a lot of red out there. These, let's see, we have cardinal flower, and I might be missing, I guess you would say prairie smokes a little bit. Would you consider that red or is that pinky?
Yeah, I think that's more pinky, but royal catchfly,
Royal
and
catchfly.
that's a red one. That one might be in one of our pictures later too, next to the cardinal flower. We'll have to see.
Okay, so this one, our wild columbine, great plant, blooms in April, May, June. Full sun to full shade, medium to dry soil. So this is a real champion of a plant. This can go pretty much anywhere you have a space. Again, full sun to full shade, medium to dry soil. There's not too many places where this plant won't do well. And it only gets, it's nice and small for urban landscapes, suburban landscapes, only gets 1 to 2.5 feet tall, moderate growth weight, self-seeds readily. However, I have to say, I have never had any issue with this self-seeding at being at all a problem. I don't even know if mine has self-seeded, to be honest with you. I wish it would a little bit. It comes up and it looks really nice where I planted it, but I know some people can say that this readily self-seeds and can be kind of, you know, too much. I have not had it self-seed at all. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know why that is, but it does really well for me, but it just doesn't self-seed for me. Um, it's a larval host plant for the Columbine dusky wing, and it attracts lots of hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies. It is somewhat deer and rabbit resistant, native to the eastern US and hardy in zones 3 to 8. And here's its hardiness, I mean, its native range. So I guess I would say it's the eastern and central US. And the unique tubular flowers are especially adapted to attract hummingbirds. So if you're somebody who really wants to try to get hummingbirds in your yard, this is one of those great flowers to add because this will definitely beckon to them. And you know, you go up to the top of the flower, a lot of these tubular flowers that are so long, a lot of the bees have come up with a way to cheat that can't get all the way up into the long tubular flowers. They'll drill a hole at the base of it and steal the nectar out that way. And then they don't pollinate anything, but they get fed. So they you know they figured out a workaround.
So here's another beautiful spring bloomer and another great woodland plant that loves shade. This is great under trees. It's just a really sweet, beautiful plant. Wild geranium. It's a common woodland native with these beautiful pinkish purple flowers and also a really cool leaf to it. So it's got some really nice structure even once the flowers are gone. It definitely attracts bees and butterflies. A lot of bees really like these open landings, and that's how they get the pollen here. So those are really nice and easily accessible for them. And it blooms in April, May, June, sometimes into July. I don't know. Has yours bloomed that late, Kathy?
You know, sometimes I'll get a sporadic bloom later, like, you know, one or two flowers. It definitely does its heaviest bloom in May and June, but I will get sporadic blooms later in the season.
Okay. And it's also not super picky about its soil type either, which is really nice. Just like the uh, um, the wild columbine, that one's not super picky about its soil type. So medium to dry soil. It only gets to about 12 inches tall, and it makes a beautiful ground cover. It's got a moderate growth rate and is mound forming. It's also the larval host plant for the white-marked tussock moth, and it is also somewhat deer resistant. And this one is also going to be native to the eastern and central US and hardy in zones 3 to 8. And here are some baby geraniums that I grew from seed. And you get about, I'd say, maybe 50 seeds in a little packet. And the germination rate on these, I'd say they're a little bit trickier to grow inside. Again, anything with a 60-day stratification, you got to like watch the seeds and make sure, that they're not drying out in your fridge or, try the winter sowing to see which method is going to be more successful. But I definitely got at least 10 plants out of that batch of 50 seeds. So to me, that was successful and it was a good learning process. And then here's my little plant in the garden. So, once you grow from seed and then you get to go back and visit your plants every season and see them coming up, it's just truly, truly rewarding.
So you would say that the 60-day germination is, by and large, you have a lower success rate on the 60-day germination seeds? You have some, but maybe not as many germinate, or were there some 60-day species that you had like a very high percentage of germination?
I think it's more species specific. I find that wild geranium and Jacob's ladder, both for me, was a little bit lower germination rate, maybe 15 to 20%. But again, each year that you grow, maybe you're learning something new or getting better at it. But then Liatris, a button blazing star, we're going to look at that one in a little bit, and wild strawberry. I have fantastic germination rates with that. So I think it's a little bit of the grower, it's a little bit of the species, it's a little bit of the conditions, and you're just learning as you're going. So, we're not all professional growers. We're doing this just to kind of experiment and get more native plants into the ground and see what we can do. So when you do have those successes, they're definitely something to celebrate. And here we can see our native range. So almost half the country wild geranium is native to, goes all the way up into Canada. And then this super cool moth. I mean, I just love seeing what the caterpillars look like versus the actual moth itself. Like the moth almost looks like it has a skull on its back, and then the caterpillar is this crazy looking thing with a red head, but it's still so cute. And so
It's so many of these caterpillars are just comical.
yeah, they're like super characters. So anything we can do to help them survive, and all we have to do is grow and, plant the plants that they need.
And then our birds will eat well.
Exactly. Although I don't know if I'd want to eat this if I were a bird, would you?
Not really, but I bet you they'd love it.
Yeah.
Those hairs look kind of like I think I would be gagging on those hairs, but I bet it wouldn't bother the birds.
Yeah, they're probably used to all of that.
They don't mind spider legs.
Right?
All right, this one, boy, when this one is blooming, it is so, so pretty. This is just, again, just like the Virginia bluebells, this just is so spring and a beautiful cool spring day with the I mean this is just it's just an awesome and underutilized plant. I mean I just our native Jacob's ladder is such a beautiful spring plant. The plant's name comes from the arrangement of its leaflets, which resemble a ladder. And it is a common woodland native with these blue-purple flowers. So if our forests weren't overrun with invasive species, you would have the pleasure of seeing these grow there in the spring. And hopefully there are some places where they are still growing, but not enough. We've lost a lot of them to invasive species, but that's why it's even more important to try to bring them back, some of them back into our landscapes. It does attract bees and butterflies. It blooms April, May, and June. And it likes part sun to full shade, medium wet to medium dry soil, so pretty adaptable. It gets to be 12 inches tall. If you are, it's a very unassuming, meaning it's not, it stays, I mean, it very slowly the clump might get larger. It's not overly readily going to like seed itself all over the garden. I wish it would, but it's a very, if you're concerned and you like a very formal landscape and you don't want any plants that are going to seed themselves or get too tall or not be a nice formed clump, this is definitely one that would be beautiful in the most formal of landscapes. So go ahead and add some of this to your spring garden. Moderate growth rate, again, forms clumps, somewhat deer resistant, native to the eastern and central US and hardy in zones 3 to 8.
So as we look at these pictures, I just want to call out a couple things because when you're growing indoors, you're visiting your seedlings probably twice a day. You're going to check on them and you're going to see more things than maybe if you just have your jugs growing, you might check on those, every couple of days. So the Jacob's Ladder seedlings are some of the coolest seedlings I've ever seen because they have this cool structure that resembles its ladder-like leaves. And so it pops up with these kind of multiple shoots and they're just really elegant and beautiful. And something I also noticed too when I grew these indoors and then I planted them outside, they looked like this when I grew them indoors. But when they came back the next year, their leaf structure looked completely different. So, as they're growing inside, they're going to look a certain way, but when they're in their native conditions and they're, adapting to the native soil and the outside conditions, they could look a little bit different. It's just kind of fascinating.
So when you said that you would go visit them, a couple times a day, tell us the truth. When you would go visit these guys, did you say hello to them?
Oh yeah, you got to talk to them, play the music. They love it. They love it. I mean, it's so relaxing, especially in the winter when, we're not really touching soil that much during the winter. So that's really good for our endorphins too. So they give us all of that and then, we give them the attention too. So here's one of those same plants, and that's what it looked like, the next year. So that structure that I had inside was completely different than how it came back. It came back looking like a normal Jacob's ladder, but inside it looked like dinosaur Jacob's ladder.
Wow, that is amazing. That is so amazing how they change. You know, how when they're babies, they look so much different, but even the leaves, the leaves look so much bigger, whereas the leaves on a full-grown Jacob ladder are very petite.
Exactly. Yeah. So just really kind of fascinating that the soil and the light conditions really do make a difference in how the plant looks.
And as you can see here, it is native to the eastern and central US.
Another one of my favorites, wild strawberry. Some people would consider this plant a little bit aggressive, but I just love it because it fills in so quickly as a ground cover. If you're trying to fight off some like creeping Charlie or something really awful, like this could really solve your problem. And in addition to that, it's an amazing host plant for lots of different moths that we're going to take a look at. So
It's
this wild
actually a
strawberry,
keystone, it's a keystone plant, at least in our
yeah,
area. It's a keystone plant, and that means that it is one of the species of plant that has the most environmental ecosystem value. So it is a very, it is an ecosystem powerhouse. You're right, it can be kind of aggressive, but if you have a large landscape or problem areas, problems with invasive, then this is an amazing plant.
right. Like I have some winter creeper I need to rip out in this garden. I have some English ivy, and where those plants were, after I rip them out, I'm going to put in wild strawberry because I know that this can take over and drown out that old nasty stuff, invasive stuff that I don't want. So this one might be something to try. And it's native to like the entire country, so pretty cool. It is the ancestor of the modern cultivated strawberry, and it's known for its intensely flavorful fruit. So if you compare this to our big, big strawberries, this is going to be way sweeter and tastier. So it's going to attract lots of birds. They love to eat berries and some mammals too. They have these little white flowers that bloom in the spring and they're going to turn into the berries. And that will be blooming in April, May, and June. It can grow in full sun to full shade. I had this growing under trees and bushes and all sorts of things, and then also right into the open too, and tolerates all kinds of soils, so medium to wet to dry soil. It only gets to 6 inches tall. It is a fast grower. It spreads by runners. It'll send out these little shoots. Makes a great ground cover, like we said. It is deer resistant and it's native to the entire US, party in zones 3 to 9
And
or 3 to 8. Sorry.
I want to mention here, there is a non-native uh, variety of strawberry that has been planted a lot in gardens. And it is and I forget the name of it. I don't know if you can look it up, Lexi, but it's not our native. Our native has the white flowers. And even though it can be robust and get rid of, some problem plants or, invasive species that you have or kind of help you battle them, the other one that's not native does not have the benefits of our wild strawberry, and it can be very aggressive, and it's not the native version. And the way you can tell the difference apart is our native wild strawberry has white flowers, but there is a non-native one that was, you know, planted in gardens a lot that has yellow flowers, and that's kind of a nuisance plant.
And that one's called mock strawberry. I don't know
Mock
the
strawberry.
scientific, but yeah, it's mock strawberry.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this one is super easy to grow from seed, and the seeds are tiny. So you do your cold stratification if you're going to grow indoors. Since they're so tiny, you just put them on the surface of the soil. And the same if you're going to be doing your winter sowing, just put them on the surface of the soil and give them a spritz with the spray bottle to keep them wet. And so you can see their leaf shape taking form in these little pots. And then here it is out in the garden, just such a sweet little plant, and it's really fun to grow.
One of Lexi's favorites, although there are many.
Yeah, everything is turning into a favorite for sure. So here you can see this massive native range, which also, makes it really interesting that it needs this cold stratification period to get it growing and germinating. But yeah, just another reason why I do love this plant is because it is host to numerous small moths. So our grizzled skipper, crocus geometer, purple line sallow moth, and probably many others that aren't pictured here, but definitely something to give back to the ecosystem. And like Kathy said, why it's considered a keystone species.
Prairie smoke. This is such a unique native ground cover. And you get cool little pinky flowers, and then they open up and they have this fuzz on them that looks like smoke. And when you have a lot of these like planted together, it's like such an ethereal look in the spring garden. And then the other cool thing, at least here for me, the foliage that hugs the ground. There's ground hugging foliage, and then these flowers come up in the spring. The foliage for me is evergreen. It stays green all year, all winter. So that's nice too. It's always nice to see a little bit of green in the winter. Seed heads have the feathery plumes that give a smoky appearance. It really is a very cool looking plant in person as well. Blooms May and June, full to part sun, medium to dry soil, and this can withstand rocky conditions. So if you have really problem soil with a lot of gravel or dry, this is a plant that would do well there. Or even if like along a driveway, cement, this is a plant that you could plant along there and it should do just fine. It only gets to be 6 to 12 inches tall, and that's the height of the flower. The actual foliage is very ground hugging. Forms clumps that can spread to form colonies. I have not experienced it being overly aggressive, at least not as of yet. I've had mine in the ground 2 or 3 years, but makes a great ground cover, attracts bees and other pollinators. It is deer and drought resistant and native to the western US and upper Midwest with hardiness zones of 3 to 7. I gotta see that native range. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, this is a cool map. I mean, I can't believe this one, like that we just snuck in there in Illinois.
It's very unusual. I mean, that's very unusual. I mean, we're like at the southern tip, but I'm looking west and I'm thinking dry, maybe desert, and this does like dry locations. Not sure why it's okay here. Maybe just because it's north, but it's certainly not going to be happy down where it's too hot and humid. I don't know. I'm just making things up here, to be honest with you.
But and it's also fascinating looking at this map, why something that can handle California and Nevada, that it needs 60-day cold stratification. Like that is just kind of fascinating. It must be something to do with its upper reaches into, the northern part of this country and into Canada, that in order to germinate, it needs those cold conditions there. But very, very fascinating.
Well, you're right. And if we looked further, maybe some of the areas where it is found out west is higher elevation where it's colder, and down where we're seeing more south, maybe it doesn't get cold enough to stratify. I don't know.
This is the mysteries
We
of the seeds.
miss the seed mysteries.
Oh, button
That
blazing
guy.
star. Oh, so cool. Look at this Luna moth. Like amazing. Um, and I just kind of, when I started growing things from seed, I just kind of thought like, wow, I could grow this like amazing exotic looking plant. I could really do that. And yeah, it's possible. So, and actually some of them are pretty easy to grow from seed. Definitely easy to grow in your garden, but from seed, it's just kind of amazing. So, like Kathy was saying, the Liatris, anything in the Liatris family is going to take 60 days cold stratification, and they all have beautiful, beautiful blooms. They just kind of have a different structure. Some are more cone-like. These ones are button blazing star or rough blazing star is another name for it.
I
And
really
it's
don't know why people hesitate to plant native. I mean, these annuals that we plant every year, your geraniums and your petunias, your not native. My gosh, they're
they don't hold a
nothing
candle to
compared.
this.
They don't hold a candle to the amazing uniqueness of our and beauty of our native flowers.
Absolutely. And the colors, when you combine them like this with some yellow, I mean, it's just like the most stunning garden you've ever seen. So, Yeah, don't be afraid of these plants. Like they are just really amazing. And the creatures that they attract, that is just the bonus. I mean, think about all the cool pictures and videos you're going to get from all the creatures that visit the plants in your garden. So I wish I had seen this Luna moth myself, but I haven't yet. Have you seen one of these?
I saw one once. It was I was going to somebody's house and it was on the brick next to the front door, kind of like all spread out. So I did see one once. It was amazing. It's so big, but yeah, that's the only time I've ever seen it. I did not see it flying.
Oh, it's huge. I think they like to be on the brick too to like kind of warm themselves up. So the button blazing star and a lot of the liatris too, they bloom from the top down, which has this really cool effect. And so you'll see some of the flowers open, and then the flowers like lower down on the stalk might not be open yet, and they just kind of are tucked up. But really, really beautiful. And you get this long blooming season too. So the plants in the Liatris genus are also known to host numerous small moths, so really important species. It's blooming July, August, September, and October. So you get, again, this amazing long period of blooming. Fold apart sun. This is a plant of the prairie, so it does prefer sun. Medium to dry soil. This is one of the shorter liatris. Some of the other ones get to over 4 feet tall, but this one's a little bit shorter, being 3 feet tall. And I think this one has kind of the widest native range. We'll look at that map, but it attracts butterflies, skippers, moths, hummingbirds, bees, like everything will be on your liatris, and it's just beautiful to see. Definitely drought tolerant because it is a plant of the prairie, native to eastern and the central US, and hardy in zones 3 to 8. Okay, here are my babies, and this is this is why I'm saying like I was just kind of blown away. I thought this would be a tricky plant to grow, but look at the seedlings. They just kind of shoot up with this one leaf right in the middle. And then here's the plant in the garden, and I was growing it alongside some sweet black-eyed Susans together. So you have that beautiful combination of the purples and the yellows together. But look at that germination rate. I mean, I had a really successful run with this button blazing star.
That's incredible.
Okay, so here's our native range, mostly the eastern and central US. And then here are some examples of these beautiful little small moths that it is the host species for. So the three-lined flower moth, the blazing star borer moth. So what it's named after, the borer moth is its partner plant to the blazing star. The glorious flower moth, which I think you sent me a picture of this in your garden last year, didn't you,
Mm-hmm.
Kathy?
Yes.
How cool to see a really pretty pink moth. And then the wavy line emerald moth, which can camouflage itself onto different plant leaves with that beautiful color and structure.
Okay, now we have our great blue lobelia, one of our native lobelias. Its tubular flowers are perfectly shaped for bumblebees and hummingbirds, and it's a favorite, therefore, in pollinator gardens. As you can see with this, here it is with a spice bush swallowtail butterfly on it. And if anybody who knows anything about the spice bush swallowtail, they have like such a cool looking caterpillar. I just planted a spice bush last year, so I'm going to be looking for those spice bush swallowtail caterpillars. I just want to see one. It's excellent for damp clay soil, and it will form colonies. So it does like it to be on the moist side. It will form colonies, but it is in no way an aggressive plant. It might form some colonies over time, but it's a pretty well-behaved plant. Blooms July, August, September, October, full to part sun in medium to wet soil. It'll get to be tops 3 feet tall, and this is interesting. Lobelias produce a secondary compound known as lobeline, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which deters herbivores. So this is a plant that rabbits are probably not going to like. So if you have a big issue in your garden with rabbits, maybe this is a plant for you. It's native to the eastern and central US and hardy in zones 3 to 9.
And this is one plant that you won't mind if it grows colonies because the effect is just so spectacular. This was from my garden last summer, this picture, and I can't get enough of this plant. Like I want to plant it everywhere. It's
And
so
mine
elegant,
bloomed so long. Mine bloomed so long.
so long. It's just a fabulous plant, and you'll always see bees and, cute little bumblebees on it. It's just spectacular.
As you can see, native to the eastern and central US, and just an awesome plant. And another one in the lobelia family. Take it away.
Cardinal flowers. So you planted these together. You planted great blue lobelia and cardinal flower together,
These are
right?
beautiful plants to plant together. The colors really accentuate each other well, and they like the same uh, sunny to part sun, but they like the wetter conditions. So they like the same conditions, and the colors really pop together. So they're great companion plants.
And this is probably the most popular plant when we have our plant sale. Everybody is asking for this plant and they just have memories around this plant. My mother would grow this. They just have this emotional connection to this plant and it's not hard to see why. It is absolutely stunning, red color. Like Kathy was saying, you don't see a ton of natives with red, but this one really pops out and it's going to attract so many hummingbirds. If you're quick enough with your camera to get a picture of them on your cardinal flower. It would be amazing. I definitely saw a lot last summer, but I wasn't fast enough. So, but it's definitely going to attract all of those beautiful hummingbirds and lots of pollinators to your garden. So again, like Kathy was saying, prefers these moist to wet soils. It's going to thrive near water sources and it's going to bloom July, August, and September. So height of summer, fold apart sun, 3 to 4 feet tall again. So it's like a perfect companion to the great blue lobelia. And again, this is also going to produce that compound that's going to deter our rabbits and our deer. And this one has a pretty broad native range. I mean, it's definitely broader than the great blue lobelia.
Yeah, it really is. That's amazing. And I'm not going to say, I mean, some people say that they struggle with this plant, that it doesn't do well for them. And, it's one of those plants that you can find a place where it to me, it kind of like, you see how this one is where it pops up like one here, one there. It doesn't like take over and clump and take over an area like a big clump of red. It kind of it mixes in with other flowers so that you'll have other flowers and then you'll have a little poke of red coming up. You know what I'm saying? It seems to like to do that.
Yeah, it's not like an aggressive red too. It's like a kind of a soft, pretty red. So all of these ones in this picture I grew from seed. And again, I was kind of surprised. I thought, wow, I actually grew these from seed. There's a little bit of that royal catchfly lower in the picture that has like a
Oh,
different
yes.
shaped flower. And then it's just mi mixed in with like milkweed and I think that's sweet black-eyed Susan there. So, you could mix it in and kind of have this prairie effect. And it's just a beautiful plant. Or you could just do straight species. You could do just cardinal flower with the great blue lobelia together, just some lobelias and keep it simple. So, lots of different ways to plant these plants and just depends on what kind of effect you're going for.
Okay, rattlesnake master. Now this looks like some kind of a plant from Mars. This is one of those plants that if you want, it's pollinators love it, and it's a very unique, strikingly structural plant that looks like nothing that you've ever seen. I guess you could say it maybe sort of resembles a thistle, but it's got all these little balls all over it. So really, really not so much like a thistle, but just a really unique um, I mean, people see this plant and they notice it. It's a very noticeable, like kind of show-stopping, unique, unusual plant. And it is, and the pollinators just love it. Its bristly flowers and coarse leaves make it largely ignored by deer and rabbits. So that's a plus. It attracts bees, butterflies, and beetles. Blooms June, July, August in full sun. It does like sun. Medium wet to dry soil, and it'll get about 4 feet tall. It is deer and drought resistant, and native to the eastern and central US, hardy zones 4 to 9. Just want to say with this, it does like full sun. It does have a tendency to fall over and need to be staked. I don't necessarily know, depending on what kind of a landscape look you're going for, maybe this would not be, many of our native plants are perfectly appropriate for your front landscape. This one, maybe not, maybe this would be thing, it does have a tendency to fall over, but usually I think it probably falls over if it's not getting enough sun. This one really likes full sun. So if you have a super duper full sun place, this won't be as prone to falling over, but things tend to fall over if they're reaching for the sun, and then the weight of all those flowers on the top can make that happen. But a very unique plant.
You'd think that that plant would only be like a desert plant, but look at its native range. I mean, again, this is just the fascinating thing about native plants.
Yeah, I mean that looks like some kind of like almost like a cactus or something. It's so unusual, and here you have it in more tropically areas. And here, I mean, we're not, believe me, we're not tropical, but you have it down south. So, and it was interesting to me that this is the host plant for the black swallowtail butterfly. I did not know that this was another host plant for that guy. We always
Yeah, isn't that cool?
think
And
on
I mean,
parrots and our golden Alexander, but didn't know that that was like in the same family.
the swallowtails are just so nice to have visit your garden because they're just stunning.
They're stunning. And here's Lexi's backdrop.
Mistflower. So I found out something interesting about this plant is that it's been recategorized. It used to be categorized with bone set, which is the leaves kind of look similar with bone set, but it has a white flower and it can get pretty tall, whereas this is shorter. So it kind of has some of the same characteristics as that. So Mistflower, it can spread easily to form a dense ground cover. We included this in our series on native ground covers. It gets to be about 2 feet tall. And so with this recategorization, any insects that feed on Eupatorium species, which is the bone sets, can also use or may use Mistflower as a host plant. So it's got some really good benefits there. It attracts butterflies and bees. Of course, the pollinators love it. And this is a later season bloomer. So July, August, September, and October. Full sun to parch shade, medium to wet soil. And again, it is deer and rabbit resistant and native to the eastern and central US and hardy in zones 5 to 9, so a little bit lower. So there's our native range, and look at some of the cool insects and these moths that could use mistflower or bone sets as a host plant. So we've got this climbing moth with just these striking colors. Here's that three-line flower moth again, and I've never seen anything like this before. The lined ruby tiger moth. Look at
No,
those
I'm looking at
underwings.
these and I'm gonna have to go outside and try to look at moths more at night because I would love to see one of these climbing moths or that lined ruby tiger moth. Those are just amazing. And I have quite a bit of this mist flower in my landscape. So I guess I got to go outside more and be like the nerd of the neighborhood with my flashlights or something, trying to look at moths more. We
Yeah,
don't
put up
know what's
a
out
white
there.
sheet to attract them or something.
Yeah.
But your mist flower is growing under, like, it's more in a shady area, right? Like under trees?
It is. I have a birch tree, and then kind of in the understory of that birch tree is a cedar. And it's kind of growing in the shade of both of them. So it might get a little bit of light, for a couple hours in the late morning, early afternoon when the sun is at the right angle, but it gets a lot of shade, and it's kind of a difficult area that it would be hard to get plants to thrive in, and this really does nice, and it really covered the ground and filled in an area that was just a difficult site, and I was glad just to have cover. And since I have that cover, guess what I don't have?
No weeds.
No weeds. Okay, and last one tonight is our big leafed aster. And like Lexi had said earlier, or I had said earlier, that pretty much, or most of our native species of aster do need 60 days. Those seeds need 60 days cold stratification to germinate. The big leaf aster is often used as a ground cover in a shady woodland area and can be very successful in shady, drier areas, where the trees are taking up a lot of the moisture, where other plants struggle. It is the host for the pearl crescent butterfly, and it blooms in August, September, and October, and it's a very important uh, species of plant for our bees and butterflies. It's a wonderful nectar source for our migrating monarchs and our bees getting ready to hibernate and so on. It grows in part to full shade, and it likes medium wet all the way to dry soil. So again, very can tolerate a lot of different conditions underneath our trees. It grows 1 to 2 feet tall, and it is deer resistant. Native to the upper eastern US, and hardy in zones 3 to 8. So let's take a look at this this native map. And there we go. And I do have some of this in my landscape, and I do get the pearl crescent butterflies in my landscape. So even though I get the butterflies and I have the plant, so I'm assuming that the caterpillars came off of some of my plants.
Right.
Never
Even if you
because
haven't seen the caterpillar.
I don't go around, I don't see the caterpillars, but I know they're there because I'm getting the butterflies. You can see them by day, and I know I have a lot of moths at night. I don't identify them. So I'm assuming those caterpillars are on the plant, but it's very hard to find them on the plant. You know what I mean? You really have to, I don't know. I mean, I know they're there, but you don't see them, right?
Yeah, they're good at hiding themselves and
They
camouflaging
sure,
themselves.
they sure are. I mean, I'd
And
like
this
to,
is just like the most unassuming plant, but it's always filled with pollinators. There's
yes.
something about these little flowers that you will always see tons of different bees, like from the tiniest little bees to the biggest, fattest bumblebees. They're going to be all over this aster. They just love it.
Yeah, and you wouldn't think, I mean, it doesn't have an exceptionally big flower on it. The center isn't that big, but boy, talk about a magnet, talk about a pollinator magnet. This is it. And with that, that brings us to the end of our presentation. I would just like to remind you to please subscribe to our channel and like this video if you like the content that we bring you. And I also want to ask, if you are going to be starting some plants from seed this year and you're working on that at home now during these cold winter months, pop in the comments. We'd love to hear what kind of plants you're working on and what kind of plants you're trying to start from seed. We'd love to share that and hear what's going on out there. And with that, I'll say goodnight, and we look forward to seeing you in our next presentation.
Thanks for joining us.